Hi, how you doing, Ray?
Oh, we don't have to for you.
How you doing? We were just asking about you. How you doing? Good to see you. I don't know.
All right.
Well, Paul,
If we could have the panelists to take their seats up front, we're gonna get started in about 1 minute.
how are you, Dave? Lauren King. Good to see you again. You at the community meeting, weren't you? Was it Woodmore? Hi, how are you?
Good to see you again. How are
See
you?
you again.
The weather out there's got you, huh?
And I don't know, I can't get rid of this cold. It keeps going away and it keeps coming back. But anyway, I'm going to the doctor tomorrow.
Well, you have beat off several. I believe you will beat this one too.
Okay. I'll send that to you.
Mhm. I don't know. Wait for instructions. It's the moderator.
Let's drive over.
You want to get the
Just sit wherever you want.
Well, yeah, it's might be useful to GPS or something.
I can come start the Stay around. The same with you.
Well, I think I'm gonna have an honor going south.
Okay, we're going to begin. First of all, I want to thank everyone for coming out. My name is Charles Smoot. I am the district historian for Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity. And on behalf of our district director, Frank Stacy, I do want to welcome you all to our panel discussion on the history and impact of Black Greek Letter organizations in Chicago. We are honored today to be a part of the Chicago Public Library 2020 African American History Month celebration, celebrating Afrofuturism, past, present, and future. And the purpose of this is to talk about Black Greek organizations in the context of what we have done, what we are doing, and what we will be doing in the future. Before we really get started, I do want to thank the staff at the Chicago Public Library, specifically Rosalind Mabry of the Harold Washington Library, and who was also the chair of the African American Heritage Committee, who reached out to us and talked to us about having this program, and also Kimberly Hagan, who is the branch manager here at the George Cleveland Hall Library, who unfortunately is not present today. But we do want to thank and acknowledge them. So just real quick, one of the reasons we're having this event here today, the George Cleveland Hall Library is the first and oldest library to be named for an African American in Chicago. Mr. Hall, Brother Hall, happened to be a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity. And for that reason, when Sister Mabry reached out to me and asked me what branch we would like to do a program in, this branch immediately came to mind due to its historic significance. So that's part of the reason why we are here, remembering this branch was named and dedicated in 1932, which was 2 years after the death of Brother Hall. And probably a little bit will come up, more details about him in a little bit. So without any further ado, I want to do a quick introduction of our panel, and then they can give a brief introduction of themselves. First, we have Richard Lawson, who is representing Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity. We have Luann Honesty King, representing Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority. Kevin Scott, representing Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity, and David Browning, representing Omega Psi Phi Fraternity. So I do want to welcome our panel, and if we could start, starting on the left with Mr. Lawson, can you just give us a brief little bio about yourself and your experience?
Yes, my name is Richard W. Lawson. I, in 1961, initiated a Theta chapter of the fraternity. Currently, I'm the historian of the Atlanta chapter. I'm the archivist for Theta chapter, and I'm president of the Theta chapter Alumni Association, which is headquartered here in Chicago. I was a history major in school at the University of Chicago. I attended Chicago Teachers College, and I graduated when I was in the military from the University of Colorado. I retired from the National Association of Rooms, where I was director of products, and we ran a catalog. Well, I did that for 37 years.
Sister King?
Yeah, my name is Lorraine Julia Honesty King. I'm a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. I was initiated in Beta Chapter, Chicago, Illinois, in 1959. I am the current Central Region historian. I have written 3 books on the history of Central Region, 3 editions of Pledge to Remember the History of Central Region. I have also written a history of our Educational Advancement Foundation of Alpha Kappa Alpha for the first 35 years. I'm a former Central Regional Director and International Treasurer of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority. I am married to a man, an Alpha Phi Alpha, who is in the audience, Mr. Paul King, and we have 2 sons. And glad to be here. Oh, I was educated in, Chicago Public Schools, and my profession, I retired as Vice President of Student Services and Enrollment Management at Kennedy King College.
Scott?
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Kevin Scott. I'm going to go on a gamble and say I'm the baby of this bunch. I represent Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. I was initiated into the Chicago Alumni Chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi in 1998, and I serve as Chicago Alumni Chapter's historian. And I have formerly served as the North Central Province, which is a 5-state region of Kappa Alpha Psi, its historian, and I'm currently serving as the Grand Historian of Kappa Alpha Psi. And I recently also wrote a book. That book was celebrating the 100th anniversary of the Chicago Alumni Chapter. We celebrated our centennial last year. It's the first alumni chapter in the fraternity. I'm a almost 30-year veteran of the Chicago Police Department. I'm a detective with the Chicago Police Department. Celebrate my 30th year in March, this March.
Brother Brown.
Greetings. My name is Dave Browning. I am with the Beta Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. I'm an initiate of 2015, so I'm definitely the baby of the question still a little bit behind the ears, I have to say. All right, I am the historian on the historical committee for Omega Psi Phi Fraternity's Sigma Omega chapter here in Chicago, the graduate chapter. I'm a graduate of Howard University. I own a mortgage company in the south suburbs. I've been doing mortgages for about 25 years.
I want to thank all of our panelists for being here. We also, if there are any other members of any of the other, what we call the Divine 9 organizations, as things come up, please feel free to jump in. I see a Delta here. I'm sorry. Well, see, I just saw her letters, so they were. Oh, that's right. You never went by yourself. Never. Okay. So, and you know what?
Set up a Delta legacy.
Okay, well, I mean, which is why you're sitting next to them, right? Okay, cool. But one of the things that makes, so I also authored a book 2 years ago called the Jewel of the Midwest, The History of Alpha Phi Alpha in Illinois. And one of the things I realized in researching that book is Chicago and the Illinois area, but specifically Chicago, has more single letter chapters of Black Greek organizations than anywhere else in the country, including in Washington, D.C., where a number of our Black Greek organizations were started. So just here in Chicago, the Alphas, we have a single letter college chapter, which is where a couple of us were initiated, along with a single letter alumni chapter. The Kappas have at least two, the Theta chapter and Iota chapter, which were at University of Chicago, and the Chicago alumni, which, as Brother Scott mentioned, was their first alumni chapter. The Omegas have Iota chapter at University of Chicago. The AKAs have their Beta chapter here in Chicago and their Gamma chapter in U of I. Champaign, sorry.
Kappa Alpha Psi State chapters at Northwestern University.
Okay, well, I'll be honest, we have a little bit of prejudice, because I'm an Alpha from Theta, so, I'm just kidding. But, that is, have their Upsilon chapter, which is at Southern in Carbondale. So a number of chapters here in Chicago and Illinois had their early beginnings, had their early chapters here in Chicago. So one of the first things I want to put to the panel is why do you all think that we had so many early chapters here in Chicago, and what was it about the climate of Chicago that attracted the Greek organizations to begin so early? If let's start with Brother Lawson, anybody can jump in at that point.
In the case of Theta chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha, those brothers would be founding members of the chapter, came here from medical school and for law school and for dental school. On the East Coast, those schools weren't as accepted of blacks as Chicago. In 1910, Chicago had close to 28 medical schools, and 9 of them were night schools. And so they were very accepting. The University of Chicago took in Northwestern in particular, kind of plug-in almost directly to FISC. So you had a lot of graduates of FISC from Northwestern. So that was one of the reasons that Chicago came in from undergrad and they came into graduate school. I'd also like to add one of the things that they did though, they came from a black, predominantly black college. Those schools made them do another year of undergraduate work even though they had a degree, because they kind of treated those schools like they were glorified high schools. So you'll see when you go through the historical record, a lot of those students would have a BA or BS from a black school like Howard and Fisk, and then they would make them take another undergraduate. And that was what they really came from, because Chicago was a little more open in terms of being able to get into grad school for medicine and in the law school.
Well, as most of you know, Alpha Kappa Alpha was founded at Howard University in 1908 and stayed on Howard University's campus until 1913, at which time one of our members decided to incorporate the sorority to protect all that was Alpha Kappa Alpha and to expand to other parts of the country. One of the reasons that Chicago was chosen was because there was high ethical scholarship was one of the reasons that Alpha Kappa Alpha had in this preamble, high scholastic achievement. Those women were matriculating at the University of Chicago in Chicago, Illinois. So therefore, they reached out to those women of high academic scholarship and decided to do the second chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha was founded, which is Beta chapter. Beta chapter holds the distinction of being the second chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha and the first chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha chartered after the expansion, the start of the expansion. They existed as the only chapter in Chicago. Now, the campus at the University of Chicago were not only, Beta chapter was not only made up of women matriculating at the University of Chicago, but they took in both graduate and undergraduate members throughout the Chicago area and into some of the suburbs where they were matriculating in other schools. So Beta became what it was known as a city chapter, and it was mixed chapter at the beginning. Beta existed by itself in Chicago until 1922, with the establishment of the 8th graduate chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha, which is Theta Omega chapter, which is my chapter. I'll give a shout out to them. And, that is what it was. And so they existed for that length of time through all of the discrimination, and they persisted and pursued through all of the racial discrimination and the gender discrimination, and continued to fight for civil rights and for the rights of humans as such. And that is how Chicago actually got chosen, based on select achievements of those women who were at the University of Chicago.
Yes, as Private Lawson happened to mention, that Chicago was a unique place in comparison to many other places in the country, especially where Blacks were largely populated. And at that time, just after the turn of the century, we find that there was an influx of Blacks that saw the opportunities, learned of the opportunities here, not just in the Midwest, but specifically in Chicago, as an up-and-coming town of not just technology, but all type of conveyance. Chicago was accessible for all sorts of people, especially our people, where we matriculated greatly, especially during the time frame of the Great Migration. So our fraternity brother, Robert Sinsay Abbott, the founder and editor of the Chicago Defender newspaper, was a huge impetus for that, with his paper mentioning about all of the opportunities that Chicago had. And that paper, as many of you may know, was put on the trains. They went down south. They had a big change with that population of Blacks here in the city because of the opportunities we had here that weren't in other papers. It is a little bit after our IOTA chapter was founded at the University of Chicago, or chartered at the University of Chicago. He was here working for the Department of Labor, and he happened to see all of these opportunities for himself. And that's when he was the catalyst behind starting the Chicago Alumni Chapter as the first alumni chapter of the fraternity, because of the fact that, not just because of the opportunities, but those opportunities created a ripple effect of what he noticed, that there were an influx of individuals, of like-minded individuals who he felt really epitomized what our fraternity was all about. And so based on these opportunities and the types of people who were doing their, across all the fraternities and sororities at the time that were doing remarkable things, he felt this was the place to be able to put our stamp as the alumni chapter to follow IOTA's footsteps.
Definitely agree with what has been previously stated. Opportunity was abundant at that period of time for progression for African Americans and other minorities at that time. So I also agree that it was a transportation hub. You had so many inroads into Chicago, and I believe why, in Omega's case, why Omega came here is because one of our founders, Ernest Everett Just, was actually got his PhD from the University of Chicago in 1916. So there was definitely a draw for Omega to come to Chicago at that period of time. It's a little obscure the information that we have about Chicago as far as single letter chapters. When you brought that up, IOTA was actually not a Chicago chapter originally. IOTA was originally started in New Jersey.
Oh,
Okay, Atlantic City to be specific, but Sigma was the first chapter in Chicago in 1921. And what happened was initially Sigma started. We changed all graduate chapters to what we call Sigma Omega, so it no longer was a single letter chapter. So any chapter that has Omega after it was originally a single letter chapter and is now a graduate chapter, and that's why we have Sigma Omega. So actually Sigma started in 1921 in Chicago at the University of Chicago and Northwestern, and that's how we got introduced into Chicago and Derry.
It's a couple of things came up in that, looking at the way everyone interacted. One of the joking things one of the mistakes I made early in learning about the historian doing historical research is I was doing research on Theta chapter and found a bunch of names, and actually I sent the information to Brother Lawson. And there was one name that didn't make sense. And I said, well, I'm not sure if he's an alpha. And Brother Lawson was like, no, he's not an alpha. He's a Q. It was Ernest Evers Just. Because he was listed different organizations at that time, there was a lot of support. And I think one of the reasons that Just showed up is because he did attend a number of alpha events, and we can see the same thing in other events. With the racial climate at the time in Chicago, particularly at the beginning of our collective chapters, how would you say, and this is open to anyone, how would you say the racial climate at the time contributed to any type of cooperation collectively or individually within the Greek, Black Greek organizations?
Well, I'll take it. I'm gonna have to refer to my notes on that. I'm not thoroughly, really know it very well. So, we found, meaning at that time, we were the Elite Eight. And what we found was that we had a lot of the same issues that concerned us. Because as Blacks, during the early part of the early 1900s, we were all faced with the same sort of issues, living from day to day. And so in 1928, Kappa Alpha Psi, as well as Omega Psi Phi and Sigma Gamma Rho, they came together and they had the first of what they call tri-conventions. And those tri-conventions, there were 5 of them altogether. The very first tri-convention, 1928 in Indianapolis, Indiana, each one of those organizations had their national convention at the location. And we came together really because of the fact that over the course of years, we tried to become part of the National Panhellenic Conference. And because of the fact that we were of a different race, we weren't allowed in the National Panhellenic Conference. And so for the very first time during that tri-meeting, we got together the Kappas, the Omegas, and the Sigma Gamma Rhos, and we started the process of discussing about how we could formulate an umbrella organization to be able to discuss and resolve problems that we were being met with. And so that same year was Kappa Alpha Psi's 18th grand chapter meeting. And so we talked about collectively how we could formulate this. And at that time, the 3 organizations didn't have enough authority among the 3 of them to make an action to actually create what we now know as the National Panhellenic Council. So they came back in a couple more years in 1930 to address those problems, and the Panhellenic Council was established at that time. And the charter members of the Panhellenic Council at that time were Kappa Alpha Psi, Omega Psi Phi, Alpha Kappa Alpha, Delta Sigma Theta, and Zeta Phi Beta. Alpha Phi Alpha and Phi Beta Sigma joined in 1931, followed by Sigma Gamma Rho in 1937. And so those subsequent years that we had those tri-conventions, because of the fact that they saw the benefit of being able to meet together. And our organizations are much smaller than than we are now. We would never be able to repeat something like this again. But we had a sextet convention. Not what you're thinking. It was 6. It was 6 organizations of the Elite Eight in 1952. The Alpha Kappa Alpha, the Deltas, Sigma Gamma Rho, Zeta Phi Beta, the Alphas, and Kappa Alpha Psi.
Brother Lawson, want to say something?
Yes, to the question, race relations. Race relations in the city of Chicago had always been fairly tenuous. However, there was a signal event in 1919 where you had a rioting, you had the white community was attacking the blacks. Here in Chicago, they were fighting back. And so that That was the end of that. And Chicago really hasn't fully recovered from that event. That's been 101 years. There was predating the Panhellenic, there was an organization known as the Washington Intercollegiate Club. They put out a wonder book. I was showing it to a couple of the brothers earlier. Those college students, Kappas, AKA Alpha Phi Alpha, had gotten together and worked as a group to try to address some of the things that happened after the riot and during the riots. It's important to note also that the governor of the state of Illinois, Mr. Frank Lyman, he approached George Cleveland Hall, who was placed in that, and asked him to help to come up with a plan that this would never happen again. And Brother Hall put together a group of people, AKAs and Alpha Phi Alpha, that actually did work on it. Charles S. Johnson did his work when you go in Chicago with a great book.
Charles Johnson being the first Black president of Fisk University.
Yes. So the race relations were fairly bad before, but after 1919, they really it was off the charts. And so the college students really kind of came together. The Greek letter organizations came together and they formed a group, the Washington Collegiate Club, which accepted everybody that was in school, and they to address all these different problems. Panhellenic came in a little bit later on after that.
Yeah, I was just going to piggyback what he said, that the start of that riot was the death of Eugene Williams, which was he was a teenager swimming on or around 31st Street Beach, and he had drifted over into a segregated section of the lake and apparently was struck in the head by an object thrown from the shore by a Caucasian, and he subsequently died. And from that sparked off the riots that led into, the dismay, and it led into a housing situation as well. He stated that, that's where you get what we call redlining from, is, people saying you can't buy in this area, you shouldn't live alone in this area, so forth and so on. So definitely that.
I think that, and the 1990, what they were referring to here, my brother here, of course, was known as the Red Scare, the year of the Red Year, and the Red Scare, which was the biggest riot. But riots has happened right before then in Springfield, and one of the biggest ones that's ever taken place. So there had been, now back to your original question in terms of why did we come together, one reason was survival. Things were, you mentioned the conventions and the joint conventions are coming together. One of the reasons were because you couldn't stay in any hotel. All of those conventions that were held prior to that time were, members were staying in other members' homes in those particular cities and areas where they met and they came together when they came as a national organization and local organizations, because discrimination was rampant and there were only certain places we could go to. I think that one thing we need to think about, how these individuals did come together for survival and to show some joint strength that they needed each other in order to achieve some of the things they wanted to achieve. I think all of our histories will show all the barriers that we did break, and we broke those as groups together and we broke them individually, but to make places for other people to come through. We were the first to hold different events at places that had not allowed us in before. Going back to the University of Chicago, to just give you an idea, when I said that Beta Chapter existed and it was all of these chapters around the area from these colleges by themselves, solely for almost 8 years, also know that University of Chicago did not allow Black women to stay in the dormitories on the University of Chicago. So they were commuting from the communities, Black communities. They were not living on campus like the rest of the individuals. As a matter of fact, one of the biggest things that we had was Dr. Theodine Simpson, who was the first woman to receive a PhD from the University of Chicago. And one of the big issues was that she was never allowed to stay on campus until one of the individuals did finally sue, and they allowed her to stay for a short period on the campus. So there were a lot of issues that we enjoy now, or things that we think we enjoy now, that they were faced with in terms of coming together and organizing. Even as late as when he says the 20s and 30s, and you talked about the council, The next big step, I guess, was and that didn't come about until the 40s, and that was I won't get the right name, the Council on Human Rights, which Alpha Kappa Alpha started, and that was a move of all the organizations that came together to petition in Washington, D.C. for the rights that we were being denied and to try to change some of the legislation that was affecting us. So that was one reason why we came together. So,
You actually brought up a good segue into what my next question is. Because of the climate at the time, there was a necessity to create programs and create opportunities for African Americans during that time to help them cope with existing within the culture. Can we start in any order we want, but can we briefly mention some of the national programs of our collective organizations that maybe had their beginnings during the time of rampant segregation that we still operate today? We can just do a quick little thing, and I'm gonna go to the Deltas to ask you all about this as well. So I'll
I am the chapter in this year.
all right, most of those that you want to know. So, but if we could just start, and anyone just briefly talk about some of the national programs that started at that time. Anyone can.
We had go to high school, go to college, which started in Chicago in 1922. And the AKAs helped us quite a bit with that when it was first started. Our first big venture with go to high school, go to college, we had an event, we had over 5,000 people that showed up. And the graduate chapter, Zion was fairly new. In 1924, when they had a big push, they were brand new, and we had a radio effort. We had people that came as far west as Iowa. That was held at William Phillips High School, High School, College. We still do it today. And like I said, the Alpha Kappa Alpha assisted us with that. They had one of their sorors, Geraldine Hodges, who was the founder of a absolutely big fan. My brother's a big fan of her. She married Alpha. Thing of this. But that was one of our programs we still do today.
Well, Kappa Alpha Psi, our oldest program that we still do today, ironically, was created in 1922 as well. It's called Guide Right. And the Guide Right program for Kappa Alpha Psi is geared towards the youth to help them to, in the same vein as Brother Lawson is mentioning, where you're encouraging young Black youth at that time to get their education. It's stressing academics and giving them some additional support that they may not have been getting in their educational system, and encourage them to continue their education throughout elementary school, high school, and then to college. And that's still a very vibrant program that we still have today. And it's the oldest program that Kappa Alpha Psi has.
Oh, we have, of course, we had the big vocational guidance program, which was started in the 20s. We don't necessarily call it vocational guidance, but most of the programs have the basic tenets of education, health, basic economic development, human rights, civil rights. So all of the programs, even though different national presidents have interpreted it to different ways in terms of formulating the national program, they all have 5 basic targets, if you want to call them, that all of the programs are based on. Of course, as you well know, everybody's heard about it. In the 30s, we had the Mississippi Health Project, which was definitely for health. And we moved on to do research of sickle cell anemia at Howard and infant mortality at Howard. So that was all health. Now, many of the programs over the years have evolved from those original categories of health, education, etc. as I said, vocational guidance program. We still do stuff with vocation, with young people. As one of the programs that we assisted with was a Golden College. The vocational education was the thing that led them to go to college, because most of the colleges that we were being allowed to did further vocational training and not so much the professions, white collar professors, I guess. So that's one thing that we did.
Our most prominent program, probably Negro Achievement Week, by Carter Woodson. We know it now as Black History Month. You know, it was to uplift and motivate, African Americans to educate themselves, to empower themselves, in order to put themselves in a better financial situations and health situation as well. But we celebrate today as Black History Month. Carter Woodson.
And that started here in Chicago.
In Chicago.
And it's notable that one of Carter G. Woodson's partners was George Cleveland Hall, who this building is named after, because of him because of Woodson working with Hall, that got Hall to be the first African American in Chicago to be named to the library board. So there was a connection there between those two individuals coming to Brother Hall.
So I'm moving for the next meeting to be at the Carter G. Woodson.
But what I wanted to ask,
Died for like a second.
and some of my fellow historians here have done and have mentioned, if you take names and then you kind of research those names to Greek letter organizations, written in our history, you will see a lot of connection and intertwining of, even if it was individuals, of participation, where they were supporting each other. I mean, you will see a lot of marriages from top leaders in both organizations. You will see them coming together to break barriers, to establish various things that we now celebrate and still continue today. So there was a lot of integration among the organizations. Unfortunately, I think that as we have moved towards the future, we have been less and less are capable of doing, but that's been on the program.
Well, the Delta Sisters, you want to talk about one of your traditional programs that you all still operate today?
Sure. Of course, we did not come prepared to speak, but I can speak to Delta. But I can speak to Delta as a national, our national initiative, but also as a language chapter initiative. Some of our initiatives that have been long term. So nationally, Delta has done Jabberwock since the 40s, and Jabberwock is education fundraising that was formed in 1921 on campus of the University of Chicago. Our Lambda's oldest event is Delta Derby, which is but also like a fun family event as well. So that's why it's so love to do this. But to show people.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about current activities and current programs of our organizations. Now, the reality is that each and every one of us could wax poetic for hours about our organization's history. But sometimes I think we get too bogged down in history and not talking about what we're actively doing. So can we talk about, and again, in any order, some of your active initiatives that you are doing to help the individual, the smaller, or the broader communities, and how it's impacting how the fraternity or sorority achieves its impact?
For each other or
Either one.
program?
Either one.
On a national level or local?
Either one.
Well, locally, let me throw this in. These two gentlemen both have participated. Urban Prep Academies, which I have,
A little bit of a connection.
Has each year a program that they call Discovering Our Cities. And what they do is they go to various companies and industries and private businesses and professional offices to learn and hear from these professions and these individuals and these companies to see how they have achieved. The place that they go to is the Community Service Center, which Alpha Kappa Alpha Theta Omega chapter built, which is at 62nd and Ingleside, a multi-million-dollar community service center, which I will say we are very proud of. We have host them there. And what we do is we have a panel of Black Greek Fraternity men who come to talk directly to these young men about college, getting to college, achieving, and what it takes to get through college. And so it's like a mentee for that day, serious talk to these young men. We have always also partnered with, I think it's Kappa Alpha Psi, at one of the elementary schools with one of your programs, your mentor program, and we have provided assistance with that. We did have, and I think it was two years ago, maybe 3, we sponsored what was called On the Table through the Chicago Community Trust, and the members of the panel came, and each fraternity and sorority purchased a table. And what it was a discussion, and it was sponsored by the Chicago Community Trust to find out what the problems were in the city, what could be done about it, and what we saw as what we could do as individuals. And it was a very productive meeting, and we got a lot of information from all the fraternities and sororities. One good thing that came out of that meeting was the need. Although nothing has really happened, I have to put that in there, but it showed a need and what we could do if we really came together as one force. Delta is not about my sister Sigma Gamma Rho, or my fraternity brother, whether he's an Alpha or an Omega or Sigma, but the numbers, the sheer numbers of us as a one force, to me, would make an impact that this city and other cities have probably have never seen. I was so proud at our 100th anniversary centennial in Washington, D.C. All the fraternities and sororities came together and marched in one line to the Capitol steps and left a process. Fraternities, sororities marching together in one line with all the leaders in front with one big sign moving to the Capitol. I mean, that is a capital, to put it that way, that we need to really explore in terms of
blood drive campaign, we have our voter registration campaign, our scholarship programs. But one thing locally that we're focusing on as a chapter right now is righting a wrong in history that we found while we were researching for our 100-year anniversary, which is coming up in 2021. And their investigation into Eugene Williams found that Eugene Williams is buried at Lincoln Memorial Cemetery without a headstone. Mm-hmm. He's been there for over 100 years without a headstone. So our current campaign for the last 6 months has been to raise adequate funds to properly mark Eugene Williams' gravesite. Because right now he's marked by a person he's totally unrelated to next to. He's known as the person next to Betty Jones.
How much are you all
So
trying to raise?
the cost to properly memorialize is $4,300. We're currently sitting at about $3,900 right now. So that's basically what we're focused on right now, just to right a wrong from history and to properly memorialize the spark of the rest of the riots of 1992.
Awesome.
Yes, we have Project Alpha. We talk about the sexual awareness, about being responsible. We talk about the outcomes that can take place when you're not responsible. It's been very, very, very informative and very popular. The schools enjoy having us return for those. We do it both with people and helpless people. Those that's voter education, where we give people to vote, so forth. We have another project, which go to high school, go to college. the Boy Scouts of America, we have Big Sister, Big Brother, Big Sister program, which we've been doing, for 40 years.
So, locally, Chicago Alumni Chapter is involved with several community service endeavors. One is a fairly new one. It's a community produce food pantry. We noticed that something that we probably all experience on a regular basis is that many of the Black communities are in food deserts, and so the types of food that they are receiving in those areas is not nutritious. So we want to make sure that we introduce healthy fruits and vegetables to people in the community. So at our foundation center, the Edward G. Urban Foundation Center at 67th and Everhart, named after our last living founder, we have had this food pantry established back in August. Every fourth Saturday, leading all the way into the fourth Saturday of March, we have a food pantry there. We promote it in the neighborhood, and all the folks from the West Woodlawn community, they come out and estimate each month that we've held this based on the amount of food that we've given out that comes from the greater food depository of Chicago, is estimated that we serve 900 to 1,000 people in the community. So that's one of the things that we've been doing lately. Every year since we've had our facility there at 67th and Everhart, we've also hosted our annual back to school block club party. So we block off the street. School supplies is given to all the kids. It's free haircuts, free dental exams, free food, refreshments. We've got games that all the kids can play, as well as in our gymnasium, we have city, county, and state services set up for all the adults in the neighborhood, so they can come there and they get all the services that are provided by these organizations for free. And one thing that we did recently, which was about a month or so ago, we had an expungement and record sealing workshop. So for people in the neighborhood or anyone in the city who was aware of it, they can come out if they had some sort of minor offense on their record. We had attorneys on hand to teach them how they could get those records expunged from their record, which of course is a huge thing because those things could stop them from getting a job. It can stop them from doing a lot of different things. So that's another thing. And an annual Thanksgiving meal delivery we've been doing for, I guess, about the past 15 years. And that's in conjunction with the Grand Hall Prince Hall Masons on Cottage Grove. We come there and in conjunction with them and the 4th Ward Alderman, I think we're on our 3rd or 4th Alderman now, that we've been partnering with this endeavor. They obtain all the food, they cook it on site, they bag it up. We have several brothers that come there and volunteer Thanksgiving morning, and we distribute all that food through the area to all the sick and shut-in seniors who've requested meals. We have an annual Christmas clothing and toy drive. And we partner with a local church in the West Woodlawn. All the brothers come out and we beautify the neighborhood. And of course, our Guide Right program that I mentioned earlier, as well as our Kappa League program, which is geared towards high school young men. And of course, this program is arguably the #1 Kappa League program in the nation, where we have these young men come out, we take them on college tours. We have 4 portions of the country where we take them to a different place of the country each year so they don't repeat schools. We have all sorts of ACT and SAT college prep, all sorts of other different things available to them. And one of the last things I'd like to mention is we have a scholarship, an annual scholarship, that we raise funds on an annual basis, and we give awards out to area young men. And we have this at an event with our combined 11 Metro Chicago area chapters of Kappa Alpha Psi, and each one of those chapters give out scholarships. So the Chicago Alumni Chapter, through our not-for-profit philanthropic arm, the Edward G. Urban Foundation, has given out over $1 million in scholarships to young men since 1979.
You know, I kind of jumped the gun, if I may say, because I was talking about programs where we work with each other, and I really just didn't talk about the actual national
Hey, get your
program.
spotlight.
There were the national program that we're operating under right now, and under those 5 targets, I would say that we have operated under a program right now which they have named exemplifying excellence through sustainable service. And there are 5 target areas. And those 5 target areas are HBCUs for life, a call to action, and one of the primary programs under that is called CAP. And what it is getting young people ready to get admission to college, helping them fill out applications, helping them go through the essay process, etc., in order to go to college. The other is women's health and wellness. We have partnered with all of these organizations with our annual health fair, our annual back to school fair, and we have building your economic legacy. Now, under building your economic legacy, we just had a workshop for individuals who get real estate, rent, or anything that may have a fear. We have a firm that we have partnered with who comes once a week to the center and offers free legal advice pro bono. This is the top international firm in the country, legal firm. And so anybody in the community can come to get advice on non-criminal type of assistance. We've also have an arts program this year, and we do global impact, where right now we're dealing with Haitian refugees and trying to help reestablish them within the city and other problems that they're having, especially with the immigration problems that are going on right now. I'm happy to say that many of these organizations have come to the center and participated in our program and been a part of these programs and supported each other in these programs. But everything that they just about mentioned, it seems like we do it all under these 5 targets. But of course, we're a chapter, 370 some women. In my particular chapter, and there are 2 other chapters, one other chapter that just reached almost 400 itself. So there's a lot of women there. So there's a lot of things that we can do in terms of woman power.
And real quick, I'm gonna put the deltas on the spot again. You can talk about some of your current programs.
So on a national level, all of the Delta programming is branched off of our 5-point programmatic burst. So on a national level, some of our more notable programs would probably be Embody, which is a mentorship program geared toward African American boys. Also Delta Gems, which is essentially the equivalent of mentorship program for African American girls. Annually. At the beginning of the sorority year, we have a citywide service project where we service multiple locations within the Chicagoland area. Starting the sorority year, we were at the Pacific Garden Mission, where I think we created vision boards for homeless women to just give them a vision and some aspiration of where they can go and to know that their situation is not permanent. We mentioned for Christmas on the west side of Chicago, we had what we call our Santam drive, which was to provide sanitary napkins for low-income women who had to choose between the basic hygiene needs and food. We also recently had sex trafficking in that, where we identified the most prominent points in the city where sex trafficking is most likely to occur. My understanding is that program is on the news, where we just basically brought awareness to the community and took a stance that this is unacceptable in our community. So that's just kind of off the top of my head, but same as all of the other organizations, we have a lot of different service projects. I think someone had mentioned a college tour, we have that as well. So there's a lot of overlap with good, I think, between all of our organizations.
So thank you all for that. got to start getting ready to kind of wind down, but I want to do two things.
Yes, just a reminder.
Sure.
And I think we probably take it for granted, but I think everyone in here has license plates. And those license plates that we purchase, they're pretty expensive, most of us goes to a scholarship fund or some type of support for either their undergraduates or high schoolers. And that's a way that we've all come together in this area.
Right.
To another program that we do.
And I think it's worth noting, and there is the Chicago chapter of the National Paneling Council. They have regular meetings. Their big event is coming up actually later on this month, which I'll mention more in detail. But every year they give out a number of scholarships to college students from the different organizations, and they do other charitable events where the members of the 9 organizations do actively come together, do community service projects together, and do other programs in addition to giving scholarships. So there is a lot of interaction between our collective organizations. So one of the things that we also need to talk about is two last points. So the future of our organizations. We have the national programs that we've talked about and the current activities, but how do we, or how do you, the panelists, see the future of the organizations and the types of events and activities that you see your organization getting into? Obviously, we're all 501(c) 37 organizations, so we're prohibited from being explicitly political. But it seems that there are ways that our organizations can do things and will be incumbent upon us to do things in the future. So with that in mind, and maybe with other things, where do you see the future of the Greek organizations going, either individually or collectively, as as all of us of the Divine Nine, for the exception of 2, are 100 years old now. So what do you see going in the next 100 years or so?
Well, now I'm learning to get to where I want to be. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Alpha Kappa Alpha. The only restriction that Alpha Kappa Alpha has, and I thought it was for everyone else, was that we cannot endorse a candidate or a party. But that does not stop us from educating and voting registration and getting out to vote and providing petitions on issues to get to our local, state, and federal legislators. There's nothing that says that we cannot do that as far as Alpha Kappa Alpha is concerned. So we have, as you said, these are troubling political times. There is nothing that is stopping us, and I would like to see all of the Greek organizations come together right here in the city for locally, and I'm sure other cities have the same thing, and come up with a mandate of things that we see that need to be done and be changed and get behind. We're still dealing with fair housing. We're still dealing with food deserts in communities. In terms of things that we can demand these monies to improve our community. All of this money is being pushed out and given out, but is it affecting us? We need to be pushing for mental health, for mental health education, for facilities to treat these individuals who are having problems in the community. To get specific, we have an election for state attorney coming up, Kim Foxx. As an individual, yes, I'm supporting Kim Foxx, but more than that, we need to educate our community what it means to have a Black person in the position who understands our background, our neighborhood, and our culture in the position of state's attorney. They are after Kim Fox because she has this power. They are after Kim Fox because she has this power in the power of this position. It is the power of the position that they want back. All of the individuals who have gotten bail as opposed to going into incarceration, all of these things that she has done, we need to educate and get that record out to our community so they understand. You need to get out and vote. Lord knows I won't talk about the President of the United States in terms of the necessity for us to go out. But anybody not supporting a party or anybody with any kind of intelligence and education who looked at what happened with that impeachment in terms of the partisan thing that was done, anybody who's in the legal profession, which we have many of them in our fraternities and sororities, know that he was guilty of sin and there was nothing, the reason they just, because they're afraid of Trump, that's all it was. So we need to, I say all that to say that we need to empower our people and show them through education how important it is for them to vote, remind them of how we died for the right to vote, and for the young folks that, you know, don't say it's not going to make a difference, because it does make a difference. And they're physically knock on doors, send out literature, we can come together with joint statements and petitions and be over 300,000 strong with that in terms of that. Now, going from that, we also move and get on legislation. I remember back, Alpha Kappa Alpha, back a set aside affirmative action, the, Paul, what's the name of that? I lost it. Right, okay, and back that, to push that legislation through for minority contractors set aside. They wrote a friend of the court. We can write friend of the court briefs for legislation that we know that's coming up to make sure that they talk about it. You heard them, if you watched that State of the Union, you heard the Democrats saying, in terms of push this health bill through. And the president saying, oh, if it's on my desk, I'll sign it. Get one on my desk, I'll sign it. And they were saying it's all on your desk, but it's been held up in the Senate. We need to petition and get together and understand to push those bills, make our folks get off of their, excuse me, you know what, and get busy and do what they said they were supposed to be doing. If they're not doing it, then we vote them out. Now, there's nothing, that's not partisan, that's not supporting the candidate. This is the same thing we fought with civil rights and walked across the Pettus Bridge, you know, and this is the anniversary of that. It's the same type of thing, but we need to come together as panhandle, I mean all groups, and really move towards this direction. I fear that if we don't, we will continue to make impact individually, but as I said, I do believe that joint impact of all of us, just the sheer numbers, is more.
Brother Browning and Brother Lawson.
I agree 100%. I just feel like our community has become so complacent with how we approach several different items that affect us directly. Number one being voter registration. I feel like our community is not vested as much as they should be as far as voting. I mean, so many people want so much for us to have the right to vote. And now that we have the right to vote, I think a lot of our community take it for granted. But if that was taken away from us right now, the people would come out in masses trying to get it back. All right, so voter registration is definitely girls are about to graduate out of high school, become interested in voting and enrolled and engaged in voting from that point forward. I think they will grasp it. I'm not saying that we should give up on, you know, other age groups, but I think that we should start at that level because it's just an entry level situation and it's easier for us to engage those individuals rather than people who already have a mindset about, you know, it's not going to make a difference if we do it or not.
Push.
But so many of our people shut the door on the census people. They're afraid that Big Brother is watching or the government is monitoring them. That's correct. They are monitoring you for your benefit. These are funds are allocated to different communities. Yet we do not participate in census drive. And it hurts us directly. And the third thing, I don't want to take up too much time, mental health.
Yep.
We have to do a better job about attacking mental health in these sectors that can educate us
so that we can educate the community in order to empower them and engage them and motivate them in order to seek help. Sweet. Again, I'm also an alumni advisor for my undergraduate chapter, and they are planning a mental health program. And one age, that's when some of the mental health problems start. So by you mentioning that, I just say that there is an awareness that is growing, that is going through some of our college brothers and sisters, where things like that can be addressed. So I'll bring that, Brother Lawson.
Yes, I was going to say that. I agree with Loanne and the brother at the end there. Education and awareness. These are big, big things. 3 weeks ago at our facility, the Alpha House, they call it, at the Excel Center, we had all of the judicial candidates there. And they came and we had an open house on all the brothers in the community come here. So we were trying to make people aware of what's there. I'd like to remind everybody too, with this administration, this is not the worst we've ever seen. During the time when the big letters were coming, very in their early days, we had President Woodrow Wilson, who absolutely hated. And there weren't any laws in place to stop them from segregating the federal government. We did. Prior to that, blacks had many middle up and top level jobs in the federal government. That from a historical point of view, many of us have forgotten that. And it was the Greek letter people that actually fought him. And that resistance came about.